Morning guys, I am just going to elaborate the structures involved in basal ganglia. For that, I'll give a 2-minute demonstration of the structures in the brain, just the superficial structures that are clearly visible. Okay. For that, we have to go and approach via the medial surface of brain. As you all know, this is the cerebrum, this is the cerebellum, and here we have the brain stem, okay, and this is the interpeduncular fossa. Hope you all remember this. This point is the median longitudinal fissure. I am just going to make a section here so that we can see the medial surface of brain clearly. The knife that I am using now here is called the brain knife. This is for making a smooth cut. See? Can you now see clearly the medial surface of brain? Yes. In the medial surface of brain, I would like to highlight few important structures. This bundle that you find here is the corpus callosum, which can be seen on either side. This is the corpus callosum. Okay. It has many parts. It has a beak-like structure here, rostrum, a bend here, genu. This is the body, and here is the splenium of corpus callosum. Do you notice some glistening structure here, which is partly cut off and it is clearly seen this side? They both together constitute a septum which separates two cavities within the cerebrum. And this septum is called as septum pellucidum. Okay, this is the septum pellucidum. And these are the blood vessels which run in close approximation to your corpus callosum here. If you notice in this side, can you see a small cavity inside the forebrain? If you had noticed, this is the hindbrain, this is the midbrain, and this is the forebrain. And you see, I will just again demonstrate. This is the hindbrain, which constitutes cerebellum, medulla. This is the pons. These three structures constitute hindbrain, and this entire structure is the forebrain. And connecting the forebrain with the hindbrain, here you find a small peduncle-like structure. This is your midbrain. You have cavities within hindbrain, midbrain and forebrain. The cavity that is present here, can you notice a tent-like structure here? This cavity, which is the cavity of hindbrain, is called fourth ventricle. Likewise, you have a cavity here in the forebrain. If you notice, within the septum pellucidum, that is within the cavity of cerebrum, there is a cavity here. This is called the lateral ventricle. This is the lateral ventricle. This lateral ventricle extends into the front. This is anterior, this is posterior, right? So, within the frontal lobe, the extension of lateral ventricle is called anterior horn. In the center, it is called central part, and here into the occipital lobe, it is called posterior horn. Likewise, you have an extension. It's a C-shaped cavity which extends into the temporal lobe here also. So that horn is called inferior horn. It will go below like this, C-shaped structure. It will go here. Okay. Now if you notice another thing, there is a small egg-shaped mass here. Can you see here? This side. This is corpus callosum, septum pellucidum, and can you notice an egg-shaped mass here? This egg-shaped mass is called as thalamus. And this thalamus is separated from a portion here, something beneath the thalamus. I'm sure you could guess by now, this is the hypothalamus. But there is a demarcating line between the thalamus and hypothalamus, which is called hypothalamic sulcus. Can you notice the sulcus here? Yes? And if you notice one more thing, I told you the cavity of lateral ventricle is present within the septum pellucidum. But both sides lateral ventricle must communicate with each other, right? And they communicate with each other through a small opening here. And you notice here, this is called interventricular foramen. Between the two ventricles, lateral ventricles, it's called interventricular foramen. Okay? And if you notice another thing, we talked about the fourth ventricle here. There is another small duct present within the midbrain. This is the cavity of midbrain. This is called as aqueduct of Sylvius. Okay? If you notice, the hypothalamic sulcus extends from interventricular foramen till the aqueduct of Sylvius. This is thalamus, hypothalamus, midbrain, aqueduct of Sylvius. So here is the lateral ventricle, here is the fourth ventricle. Now where is the third ventricle? Must be somewhere between these two, right? I told you this is one egg-shaped mass and this is another egg-shaped mass. If you keep it like this, there will be a gap between these two, and this gap is otherwise called the cavity of diencephalon. This is forebrain, this is hindbrain, this is midbrain, and these parts of nuclei, they belong to a separate category called diencephalon, which is a part of forebrain, but it is submerged deeper. So, between the two thalamus, this place is the location of third ventricle. So, from the lateral ventricle, CSF flows into the third ventricle. From here, through the aqueduct of Sylvius, it reaches the fourth ventricle. From the fourth ventricle, it descends down through the central canal and reaches the spinal cord. Okay, this is just for introduction.